Greetings and welcome back to Prophetic Forecast. Where have you been? I've been looking for you. No, okay, I know. In seriousness, I know that I've been the one who's been away the last few months. I apologize for that. We had a big project going on over here locally, and I thought I was Superman. I'm not Superman, and I had to let something go for a little bit just so I could get this big project done. It did get done. It did go really well, and we're excited for that. But I wanted to get back to Prophetic Forecast. So we're going to kind of sum up the end of 2021. Typically, we're monthly. I hope to get us going again monthly, but that's just the way it was. We're going to combine a few months. We're going to hit the major stories that are important and relevant to Bible prophecy that are in the news. There were others that just didn't make the cut because I don't want this to be 3 months long, so that'd be 3 hours long. But some really important ones. Now I do want to state though that there are lots of programs out there with a Christian emphasis, with an Adventist emphasis, that deal with COVID, the vaccines, and mandates. There are programs on this side of the debate and this side of the debate, and I've decided for Prophetic Forecast for now that I'm just going to stay away from that topic, simply because there is enough information and so many other ministries, so many other videos like this that are discussing prophecy in the news are so focused on COVID that you can get a lot of information there. And it's just oversaturated right now with Adventist publications, Adventist videos about the vaccine and about mandates and things. So I've decided we're going to stray away from that, but we are going to still start in the world of science. I want you to notice this quote here from the book Spiritual Gifts. This is volume 3, page 64. Ellen White says this: "But if there was one sin above another which called for the destruction of the race by the flood, it was the base crime of amalgamation of man and beast, which defaced the image of God and caused confusion everywhere." Now, as Christians, we don't believe in evolution, obviously, that we were, microscopic things and then we grew and grew and grew and we've evolved to what we are today. Rather, we believe that we were created by the hands of God in a perfect environment and that we are devolving because of the presence of sin. So the antediluvian world was smarter than us. They lived longer, they were smarter than us, and their scientists were able to stay for hundreds of years rather than just for a few decades. And so their walk through science had just so much more, was so much more beyond what we have understood. And they were able to do things with genetic sequencing, the amalgamation of man and beast. Now, I have other videos out there where I talk about that in some detail. And I believe that it's clear from the context that it's man with man and beast with beast. Not man and beast being amalgamated, but man with man, DNA sequencing and changing of genes, and then beast with beast. They were creating different kinds of beasts and different kinds of man. So with all this genetic sequencing that was going on in the antediluvian world, they started to deface the creation of God, the image of God. And these beings that they had created were becoming destructive, and the world was on a quick path to destruction. And so the flood had to come to not only bury all of that evidence and bury all of those things that were so destructive to mankind, but to also slow the spread and the strength of sin. So the flood was very important, and the Bible seems to, the Bible does also seem to imply that this was an issue, that there was flesh on this earth that was not created by God. Now notice one of the examples here in Genesis 7:15. "And they," it's Noah and his family, "and they went into the ark," that was the animals, "and they went into the ark to Noah, 2 by 2, of all flesh," and it doesn't end there, period. It could just say all flesh, but it says this. It makes this stipulation, this condition, "of all flesh in which is the breath." of life. And Moses actually writes this a couple of times in the story of Noah. He doesn't just state of flesh, but flesh in which had the breath of life. It's almost like there had to be a clear condition to us that we understood that there was flesh, but then there was flesh in which God had created, which therefore then clearly says to us that there was flesh that God did not create. This was that amalgamation of man and beast that the antediluvian world practiced, okay? There was flesh in which is the breath of life, implying that there was flesh without the breath of life. But it was the animals that God saved that were created by him. They had the breath of life rather than the, I guess you could call it the breath of man. The amalgamation of antediluvian scientists with genetic sequencing. And we're told in Scripture by Jesus that we will be like the days of Noah in the end time. And we see this kind of thing today. And I'm not necessarily even talking about cloning or 3D printing, but something much, much more than that. There's a company who believes that it can genetically resurrect the woolly mammoth species. Now, we know that the woolly mammoths were created by God because they were on the ark. And the reason we know they were on the ark is because there are plenty of non-fossilized, things were fossilized by the flood, but there's plenty of skeletal remains of woolly mammoths that are not fossilized, meaning after the flood. In fact, we know that they were still around in the time of the Great Pyramids when they were built. And so the woolly mammoths they did survive the flood, and they were on this, I guess you would call it a new earth after the flood. And now, after they're extinct, that science believes they can bring it back. That woolly mammoths can come back to life by the work of science. They can genetically resurrect. Now notice the reason why. Why is science trying to bring back the woolly mammoth? Here's what they say. We are working towards bringing back a species who left an ecological void as they went extinct. We are identifying species that can be given a new set of tools from their extinct relatives to survive in new environments that desperately need them. So they're not just wanting to bring back woolly mammoths, but they're wanting to change the genes of the woolly mammoths, the DNA sequencing of the woolly mammoths, so that they can live in new areas and then bring a climate change help to the world in those areas. Science is going about the life of genetically resurrecting an old species, not just so that it can live, but changing its genetic markers so that it can do things to help the earth. This is the spirit of Antichrist. Christ is the only one who can heal the land, right? If my people who are called by my name, Jesus says that if we repent, if we turn to him, he will not only forgive our sins, but heal our land. And science is so focused on doing anything it can other than Jesus Christ. So they're working diligently to bring back these genetically modified woolly mammoths. This is the amalgamation of beast and beast, so that they can walk across, not just in their habitats they were used to back then, but around the world to help with this ecological disaster that pollution and sin have caused on this world. On this subject, let's talk about in vitro fertilization. This is a wonderful tool to help people procreate, but it's going too far. In vitro fertilization is now being used to design specific children away from certain genes which cause disease, or which might cause disease. So after the sperm and the egg are joined, embryos are being scanned for any genetic issues which can cause muscular dystrophy, cystic fibrosis, sickle cell anemia, breast cancer, Huntington's disease, Alzheimer's, etc. And the embryo that has that can be destroyed. So they're not genetically changing the embryo, but they are saying, okay, this one has things that might cause certain diseases down the road, and therefore we're going to destroy this embryo and choose one that doesn't have that gene. Let me make sure I'm being clear on this for a moment. They're not being destroyed because they're unhealthy. They're being destroyed because they potentially might have. I mean, an embryo doesn't have breasts, right? It's going to be years before that embryo, if that embryo is a female. Well, I guess men can have breast cancer as well, but most cases, of course, are with females. So it might be years before that female has breasts, and then therefore years until it might have breast cancer. But if there's even a small, tiny chance of it, that they're deciding to destroy those embryos. They're taking the decisions of life upon themselves. So again, I want to ask this question: where does it stop? Where does it stop with woolly mammoths? What else are we gonna do to change their genetic markers? Where does it stop with what we decide who lives and who survives in terms of before they're even born? Should we start destroying embryos of the unborn who have a form of mental retardation? But this exactly has been a part of the conversation. In fact, in the United Kingdom, in this last part of the year, a law has been challenged by those with Down syndrome. You see, in the United Kingdom, it is against the law to have an abortion late term. But the law states that if it is discovered that the child will have any form of mental retardation, then the parents have the right to have an abortion. And people with Down syndrome are rightly so very upset about this. Like, why does that mean I deserve to die? Right? Because someone might have Down syndrome. In fact, notice this is from the BBC on this conversation. This was July 6th of this year. But the law states terminations can be performed well beyond that window, meaning late term, if there is, quote, a substantial risk that if the child were born, it would suffer from such physical or mental abnormalities as to be seriously handicapped, which includes Down syndrome. I mean, Down syndrome is a handicap, I guess, if that's the term they want to use. It is a disability, but it is a highly functioning disability. Many people with Down syndrome live normal lives, maybe different lives. You know, I have a sister who has a form of retardation, and this world would be a worse place without her. Her here in this world makes my life, our family's life, it makes our church, it makes everyone around her better because of her. While on this subject, many of you have heard me say this before, but this is why we really shouldn't, especially as Christians, we really shouldn't use the term retard as an insult. There are people who are retarded, and they are not an insult, and they deserve better than that. They are precious children of God, and mankind is playing God. They're trying to decide who deserves to live or die, whether they have a small chance or a gene that may cause something, or that later on in the term of the growth of the embryo, that it might have or does have a mental retardation or some kind of handicap. We can now abort it. We can terminate the life. Where does it stop? Where does it stop? We're doing it to the unborn. When do we start doing it to the born? Where does it stop? We have now created robots, by the way, with the ability to procreate as well. You notice all these science things that they all have in common. It's messing with what God has done in creation. The world is trying to supplant itself as the creator. We have robots with the ability to procreate. Now, not quite so much like this, maybe, where robots are getting married and having sex and making babies. But notice what it says here. Notice what the scientists said. This is from the Science Daily, November 29th of this year. Scientists have discovered a new form of biological reproduction, and created self-replicating living robots. Made from frog cells. Remember that term, we'll come back to it. Made from frog cells, these computer-designed organisms gather single cells inside a Pac-Man shaped mouth and release Xenobot babies that look and move like themselves. Then the offspring go and do the same over and over and over. You know, the Lord told mankind to fill the earth, the animal world to fill the earth, and now we're going to be filling the earth, I guess, with robots. Now it's interesting that as we see all these connections between science and creation and what can live and what can't live and how things can grow and how things can reproduce, all these changing, and of course over the last several years we have all kinds of discussions on gender and all kinds of discussions on everything we can find under the sun to deny that Jesus is our creator. While we discuss creation and life and what powers belong to God, you know, this is all language from the book of Revelation. And now we have robots reproducing, and it is an amalgamation of beast and technology, right? Technology, Xenobots, and frog cells. Go with me to Revelation 16:13, where we're warned about in last day events about spirits like frogs. Notice this, Revelation 16:13. These spirits prepare the world for Armageddon. And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs coming out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophets. Now, this verse itself is speaking about the work of spiritualism in the last days. And while the warning is focused on demonic powers going through the world, and these Xenobots aren't exactly demonic, but they have the same focus or the same theme of fake life. The work of spiritualism is demonic power pretending to be something that has the breath of life, something that is from God. And then we have these frog cells mixing with technology, learning to reproduce. Just the language itself is all connected to spiritualism and the false life that Satan wants to create in this world so that he can muddy the waters and deceive the vast numbers of people on the earth. Let's keep rolling here with a discussion on nature. I'm sure you heard about the evening of December 10th through the Midwest as all those tornadoes hit down in several states, most notably in Kentucky. And Satan is certainly trying desperately to kill, steal, and destroy. He is about the work of destruction. He wants us to feel fragile. He wants us to feel like God has turned his back on us, that we have nothing else we can do but turn to his plans, his deceptive plans of Antichrist and the false angel of light. You heard about that, I'm sure, but you may not have heard about the terrible tragedy in Tasmania, where a public school was using one of those bounce houses that kids absolutely love to play in. When suddenly, out of nowhere, from what I read, out of nowhere, a huge gust of wind suddenly came and picked up the entire bounce house with 9 children inside and took it into the air about 33 feet high. And then the wind suddenly stopped. And 6 of those children have died, with 3 others still in the hospital. This world is falling apart. Satan is growing in his strength in this world, and his powers are being used to destroy. As I was just saying, he wants us to feel fragile. He wants us to feel like there's no hope left, that God doesn't care. And that's why we call these things acts of God, right? That God is the one causing all of these things is what he wants us to believe. He wants us to believe that the coming false angel of light and the coming Antichrist, that he wants us to believe that these things are God who's going to restore and fix this world. Listen, the answer to this global crisis of climate change is not woolly mammoths. It's not cleaner emissions or recycling. Now, I'm not saying these things can't help. Recycling, cleaner emissions, these things can help. But for a full and complete solution to these things, there is one and only thing, one and only one option, and that is Jesus in the storm. We must repent. We must invite Jesus Christ through the work of his Holy Spirit, through the ministry of his angels. We must invite Jesus Christ to come and heal our land. We need the presence of Jesus within the storm. It's the only complete solution to the problem at hand. We need Jesus. But a desperate world, seeing that we need change, still believes that we can be that change. There's many movements these days about the work of climate change and what we can do to solve it. And again, I'm not saying we don't have a job. As Adventists especially, we know we have a job to care for our planet. But the theme of these worldly entities is that we can do it without the presence of God. Recently there was the global strike, a global climate strike, which took place in September. And of course COP26, which took place at the beginning of November. And even changes are being called on for the work week, as you see here. Workers are crying out for a 4-day week. It's time for their bosses to pay attention. It's interesting that while a 4-day week doesn't specifically connect to Bible prophecy, it's interesting though that people are saying we need to change our culture, we need to change our lifestyle, and we need to change the schedule, change our work week, right? 4-day week's not going to work, but what is the Antichrist going to say? We need a Sabbath, and it's this specific day, it's Sunday. And this coming Sunday law is going to be an answer to all these other things that people are trying that are failing. It's vanity, all these things. We need Jesus, but the Antichrist will say, this is what you need. You know, all these things we're trying. It's like trying to stop a house from burning with paper towels. It just doesn't work. It adds to the problem. We know that Revelation presents the identification of that false solution, that coming Sunday law. One that the world is not yet ready for, but is getting closer and closer to. It's amazed me, and I've talked about this already in great detail. It has amazed the Bible student how fast we're working towards the end. Things are happening rapidly. And you know, and after COP26, it's interesting that these entities, these businesses, these governmental politicians got together after the G20 G20 meetings and the COP26 meetings. You know, they all came together and they said, "This is the things we're going to do," but it wasn't enough. In fact, that was the loud cry afterwards: "Was this not enough? You guys didn't do anything. You just discussed and didn't make any major changes." And it's not just from those who are young. It's not just the Gretas in the world. Many people were crying out saying, this wasn't enough. You didn't do enough. In fact, even the Vatican cried out about this. This is from the Vatican News itself, COP26. Final climate pact falls short of hopes and expectations. So the nations came out and said, this is what we're going to do. Businesses came out and said, this is what we're going to do. And many entities, most specifically, of course, the Vatican, said, this is not enough. Now, the Pope did not appear at COP26, but he did leave a message before. He spoke at the meetings prior to in a pre-recorded message, and what he called for was, Pope urges radical climate response, an exclusive BBC message. He called for a radical change. He didn't specify the change, but he wanted a radical change. Well, entities, businesses, governments, politicians came together and said, okay, here's the things we're going to do. And the Vatican said, no, it's not enough. It's not radical. Now, we know what they're wanting. They're not saying it yet. The world's not quite yet ready. But it is saying we need a radical change. And we know from Bible prophecy, one nation specifically, the United States, will say, okay, that radical change we will do. And I think I strongly believe, that it will work in a worldly sense, because that's why the nation will say, okay, hey, look how we're being blessed, and look, we need the other nations to get on board. It'll go from a national Sunday law to a universal Sunday law. People will need to see radical change. Now, what's the radical change we need? It's Jesus Christ. We really need Jesus. But the world will continue to focus more and more and more on the solutions coming from Rome. The coming Sunday law is that radical change that is going to be called for very, very, very soon. And we're already seeing steps being taken by nations towards it, but in a place that might seem strange, like why would they want the change? We even see changes being made in the Middle East, specifically in the UAE, in the United Arab Emirates. They have recently made Sunday a day of rest. Now, in what is being declared as purely a financial decision, the country has shifted its work week from Monday through Friday afternoon. To Monday through Friday afternoon. It was originally Sunday through Thursday. And so they would have all day Friday and Saturday off, using English terms. But then they have shifted it so that it's Monday through Friday afternoon, which is strange because the nation is largely Muslim. It's Islamic. The whole area is vastly Islamic, and Friday is a special day. It is a Sabbath type of day. And now the UAE is even saying, no, we'll take only half of our day, and then Saturday and Sunday. So a nation which just happens to be 13% Christian, by the way, is changing its whole work week, claiming it to be a financial decision. Now, regardless of how they get there, prophecy is being fulfilled in our very midst. Christians in the UAE, by the way, this is what I find astonishing and interesting about this. Christians in the UAE could worship on Sabbath, right? Because that was a day off. They had Sunday through Thursday, so they had Fridays or Sabbaths. They could have taken off Friday or Sabbath or Saturday, and they could have kept the Sabbath. For a group of people that believe that any day, so obviously, they're that 13%, there are Catholics, there are Protestants in that number. For a large amount of those people, they believe, any day. It doesn't matter, we can keep any day. So you think, then if you can keep any day, what's the big deal? You can just keep Sabbath. But they were the ones pushing for Sunday. Why? If any day can be a Sabbath, which, by the way, of course, isn't a biblical statement. We know the seventh day is the Sabbath. But if you believe that any day can be the Sabbath, why not just keep it on Sabbath, the Sabbath of the Bible? Why did it need to be Sunday? And I'm not just coming up with this, out of the back of my head here. This is actually what they were saying. Is they were keeping Sabbath, and it was weird. They wanted to keep Sunday. Notice this is what the General Secretary of the Bible Society of the Gulf said. It is a bit strange to worship on a Friday, but you get used to it. The UAE's reasons are purely financial, but for Christians, it will be like going back to normal. You notice that? They had Fridays or Saturdays off. They could have kept Sabbath, but they didn't keep the Sabbath. They went from Sunday to Friday. They kept Fridays off. It's a bit strange to worship on a Friday. There really is a desire to ignore the Sabbath. And so this change, while the Sabbath is a part of these days off, right? Friday afternoon, the original, which was Sunday through Thursday, you had Friday and Saturdays off. Now the new schedule in the UAE is Monday through Friday afternoon. You still have Friday night, which is Sabbath and Sunday off. But the Christian people there weren't keeping the Sabbath. They were going from Fridays to Sundays. There's just this strong spirit permeating through the church to ignore his Sabbath day. It's strange to worship on a Friday, but you get used to it. And now they're going back to normal. It's like going back to normal. The Pope has spent a lot of time in the Middle East, specifically actually in the UAE. He had a visit to the Middle East in 2014 that even at that time, many people were using a phrase right out of Bible prophecy, that he was there to heal the wounds. In fact, just saw that in a documentary I was watching just the other day. They were talking about this 2014 visit that Pope Francis had to the Middle East, and they used that term. He was there to heal the wounds of the past. He is going about the work of healing the wounds, but it's his wound that was given in 1798. Then again, in 2019, he visited Dubai. And it was notable for one major focus. So he came in 2019 with one major focus, and this was the focus here. This is what this was his visit in 2019. He met with the religious leaders there, and notice what Mike Pompeo, who was at the time the Secretary of State of the United States, notice what Mike Pompeo said. The papal visit was a historic moment for religious freedom. The people there in the UAE could have kept the Sabbath. For people who believe any day can be the Sabbath, they could have kept the Sabbath, but they didn't keep the Sabbath. They moved it to Friday, and then the Pope went and visited, and now we have them moving it so that Sunday can be free. The world is marveling after the beast, is it not? In fact, then, it should come as no surprise that in that same country, in its capital, Abu Dhabi, we have the Abrahamic Covenant House being built, and it's supposed to be open next year. Now, this is directly linked to his 2019 visit. When Pope Francis visited, the different sides, religious sides, agreed to sign a document called the Document on Human Fraternity. And the Abrahamic Covenant House is a direct result of that joint decision. A shared location, a place where each of the major religions has a building for worship. You've got a mosque, you have a synagogue, and you have the St. Francis Church, not named after the Pope, but named after Francis of Assisi. This is clearly connected with the new weekend discussion in the UAE, isn't it? You've got Friday afternoon for the mosque, you've got Sabbath for the synagogue, and Sunday for the Catholic Church. Mind you, though, all three of those religions reject the work of Jesus Christ. And even though the synagogue will meet on Sabbath, it is still a rejection of Jesus Christ. All three standing together in one spot, joining hands, working together, changing the weekend with, we know where it's heading, to elevate Sunday as a special day. A day that teaches the authority of the beast, not the authority of the Creator. Now, on the topic of marveling after the beast, it was also in the news that the Catholic Church, in honor of the Vatican-Beijing Agreement, which was re-signed last year, we talked about that then, would nominate a new bishop in China. Now, this bishop who was chosen is openly a strongly outspoken supporter of the Communist Party. And this bishop was actually nominated by the Communist Party itself as part of that Vatican-Beijing Agreement, that the Communist Party selects the bishops and that the Vatican has to sign off on it. And that's part of the big agreement that we've discussed in the past. But where this bishop was to serve was, of course, notable. So you've got the Communist Party choosing, this is like the investiture controversy from way back, right, about who can select bishops, but the Communist Party has the right to select its own bishops for the Catholic Church in China, and it just so happens they chose a very strong a proponent of communism, and he is now the new bishop of Wuhan. Pope Francis approves appointment of communist bishop to Wuhan. Wuhan. Guess I'll just leave that there and keep going. No surprise to any of us how much, why that decision deals with Wuhan. One of the last things we're going to discuss was that a young man passed through the security lines in October to greet Pope Francis. The 10-year-old boy who has epilepsy and a form of autism, he's on the spectrum, was actually in Rome from another town for further medical testing. He came with his parents, and they were looking at him for a possible brain tumor. He had lots of symptoms of a brain tumor. Some early tests had shown that there might be a tumor, so he was there to see if there was a tumor. But he snuck through the security lines and actually walked up the steps and came over to the Pope. And actually, as all of these stories we're talking about, you'll have links down below. You have a video down below of this boy actually coming. He's trying to take the skull cap off of the Pope. It's actually a cute moment. And that was widely promoted in the news of how cool this was. You know, a 10-year-old kid and the Pope kind of hanging out up on these steps at the I think this was St. Peter's Basilica. But what happened later wasn't quite so much in the news as this. About 3 weeks later, the mom began to report that the boy was stronger ever since this moment. That as the boy, she was shocked anyway that the boy was even able to climb the steps, walk up the steps to come to Pope Francis. And that all of the symptoms are gone after this visit with the Pope. That even the brain scan came back and showed that there were no signs at all of a brain tumor. The mom believes that it was a miracle which was performed by touching the Pope's head. As we continue to speed towards the end, we know that there will be signs and wonders and miracles wrought, claiming to be on the side of Christ. But these will not be on the side of Christ. This will be the work of Antichrist. We're told that as the world gets more and more powerful with these signs and lying wonders, this will be a sign of the end. Jesus says this, Matthew 24, verse 24 and 25. For false Christs and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you beforehand. And these things are going to be wildly powerful and widely promoted as the work of God. And they're going to be so astonishing that even the elect would want to be deceived. There's going to be a natural desire to go, wow, that's so powerful and amazing. And we're getting faster and faster to that moment. We're speeding up to the end. But we've got to realize that these are signs of false Christ, signs of false wonders, signs of the work of demonic powers. Only Jesus can save. Only Jesus can help this world. Only Jesus can help this planet. Only Jesus can change our culture and our society. Only Jesus can forgive sins. He has told us beforehand to stay ready. So we have no reason to fear, no reason to feel any doom and gloom. Jesus is coming soon. We're going to hang in there. We're going to cling to Jesus, follow the Lamb wherever he goes. As 2020 is coming, it doesn't matter, whatever it is that we will face. If we cling to Jesus, keep our eyes focused on him, he will see us through. So until then, let's stay focused on Jesus as things unfold. To keep our eyes open to prophecy, keep our eyes upon Jesus, and see what he has in store for you today.